This man requires no introduction. Danny Mayer, CEO of Opmantec, recently, a small company based on the Gold Coast, but doing big things, and recently signed a six-figure deal with a Mexican telco, which is all over the papers, and it just shows that such impressive industry expertise lies right here on our doorsteps and has tremendous reach beyond our local community, but into external export markets. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Danny.
Thanks, Michael. I have a very husky voice because I've been travelling a lot, so the planes, I'm not sick if anyone shakes my hand, but I've lost my voice, so I'm glad we have a microphone. Michael asked me just to run through a little bit about my background in Opmantec, and then my views on the evolution of the business, why you would do a startup in Queensland, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about the internet because that's really our gateway to the world from here. So whenever I talk about commercialising innovation, and sometimes I describe myself as a professional commercialiser of innovation, I always put this sort of disclaimer that there's general principles and trends and methods, but there's no rules, and anyone who does a startup, it's an entrepreneurial trip, and if there were rules, we pride ourselves on breaking them anyway. That's what we like to do. So I would say that when undertaking a startup, you always listen to all the advice you get, but unless it makes sense to your own reason and your own judgments, then you just ignore it, right? And or if if it makes sense to you, then it must be right, and if it doesn't, then it's wrong for you. So a bit of a summary for myself. Over the last 15 years, I've built a lot of different companies, some as a shareholder, some as an employee. Sometimes I've been employed simply to globalise or commercialise a company. In the UK, I've done one that was acquired once, the USA acquired twice, Asia Pacific focus 3 times, and a global focus with 2 acquisitions. I've done each of these one at a time, and I do serve on the board of a few different companies here in Australia and in Queensland, but typically I work in one with a focus. So there's been an acquisition for me on average every 22 months. They haven't all been successful, but none of them have been bankrupt, and the best was 250 times, which is for investors 250 times what they put in. So the current project I'm working on is Opmantec. It's a global open source software company, and around 45,000 organisations in the world use Opmantec software. We're perhaps the largest provider of business software by user base in Australia. We were founded in 2010, actually outside of the Gold Coast, but we were given a grant by the Gold Coast Council to locate here. And that's why I'm always keen to give back to the Gold Coast community in particular. We do all our R&D at the Gold Coast. We're Australian Company of the Year last year, and our revenues, so we were founded in 2010, our revenues are in the millions now. And in fact, even just that one contract article in the paper wasn't correct. It was 7 figures, not 6 figures, but it's a multi-year agreement. And so we're currently under high growth. So if I was to talk about creating a startup, you could talk, you could lecture for a year, or you could do 2 hours. So I thought the top 5 for me for a Queensland startup. Some of us might have heard of minimum viable products. I say minimum viable everything. So we're small here and fast and nimble. So everything you do, you've got to think about what is the minimum I can do, what is this, and my next bullet point is write a business plan. So what is the minimum business plan I can write? It's not about having 50 pages. It might be a 2-page PowerPoint. It might be a few bullet points. But what is the minimum viable business plan that I can write? And then the next thing is you don't follow the business plan, right? One of the best reasons to write a business plan is so that you know when your business is changing, and that you know when things aren't going how you intended them to go. because being in a startup is a safari. It's not a train journey where you're stopping at a station at this time and you're moving on to the next station. So you write your plan and you keep it simple, and then you look back at it and you go, wow, things really aren't happening as I expected, so what do I need to do differently now? Find good mentors, people, groups, or even take a learning job. I know here a lot of us are graduates from university. Nobody, or very few people go to university to become a student. And the same can be said about a job you might take. If you're interested in becoming a startup, you might take a job that's going to help you go in that direction. But don't feel that you're pinned to that. You can treat some of these jobs like university, and you can learn enormously from the people you join and from the jobs you take. And leverage the Australian tax and grant schemes. Australia is not a good place for startups, and there's a lot of things that need to change in our legislation. But it is a very good place to get assistance. Here at the Gold Coast, the council is very active in the IT area, which is great. But across the country, there's some great schemes that can be leveraged. These are the stages of a business evolution that I talk about. The dreaming, which is, I guess, as the Aboriginal people would use the term, the dreaming. It's the creation, and everything flows from there. It's not about lying in bed at night and having dreams about what you're going to do. Existing, and that's sort of when you're starting, and you're really, it's great if you've come from university because you're used to living like a uni student, and when you're barely existing, and that's what happens as a business. And then the final stage, which I would call the last stage of startup at least, is or your early high growth stage, is validation of existence, and that's where all of a sudden people start to believe that you're more in existence than you do all of a sudden, So in existing, you're running around trying to tell everyone, oh, we're real, really, we are, and we've really got good things and no one believes you. And then all of a sudden you go into a new phase and everyone thinks you're more than you do all of a sudden. So that's when you're getting validation of your existence, is what I call it. And so it's those first three phases that I call the startup phases. And then go into living, where you're really alive, mastery, where you're the experts and everyone wants to come to your party, you've got the best party in town. And then you go into reinvention, of course, and the greatest reinvention of a company we've seen is probably Apple, right? And I'm sure when they reinvented themselves in their business plan, they didn't have in their plan to become the biggest provider of music globally, right? But you go and adapt. So this just, again, a quick sample of my own philosophies. So the example areas of focus, in the startup phases, it's always about minimum viable product. So what is the least I can do to get something to market, get quick feedback from customers, and customer growth is the focus, It doesn't matter what a customer pays you, or even if a customer pays you sometimes, but if you're getting customers, other customers will come. So for those that aren't familiar with the term minimum viable product, it's, as I'm saying, it's just what is the least I can do to get something to a customer, get them to use it and give us feedback. Because we're small here, we can get the feedback and adapt really quickly and fix things really fast, and customers love that. And that's one of the greatest reasons they engage with a startup. They get to have their input into the products you're developing, and they get the benefit of that, and you can work really quickly with them. But as I said, for me, it's minimum viable everything, just everything. So why Queensland? Why would you become a startup in Queensland? Maybe because you want to live here. Maybe because you find it easy to operate. You're used to living here and you don't have to go somewhere else and then go through that whole adaptation. So you're used to the business culture here and environment. Maybe there's friends, family, other support networks here that are important. But it's not a natural choice. If you're sitting outside of Queensland, you're sitting somewhere else in the world, your instincts are places like Silicon Valley and places like that are the things that buzz to your head. It's not Queensland. So we need to be conscious that when we're doing a startup here, we have to leverage the external ecosystems that are available. But if you do want to work and live in Queensland, you're going to be in a small company, so you might as well be a startup. Why not? Because that's small and powerful. So The internet is really Queensland's greatest tool and the world's greatest tool. You know, it's a cable running from here to everywhere around the world, and it gives us the ability to create linkages outside of here. Okay, and if you don't want to do that, you should just move somewhere else, right? Because and when I mentioned before, you know, get good people and have mentors, probably everyone's thinking, who can I get here at the Gold Coast or Queensland? But it's not about that. You know, you can get those people online, you can join groups online, and you can create linkages from here to everywhere. There's tools like the Compass tools and things like that online, which allow you to benchmark your Queensland startup with startups all over the world. Okay, so this is really an important tool. And there's people you can follow, you know, Eric in his book, The Lean Startup, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there's a lot of focus on creating these high growth, fast growing lean startups, and we're a great place to do that. We're smart people, we innovate fast and we act fast, and as I say, you're going to be small here, and that's what a lean startup is all about. And those companies are becoming very attractive for investment all around the world. So okay, what can we leverage from being in Australia and Queensland specifically? One of the best things that Australia has going for it in terms of a startup, if you're creating something, is the R&D. It's called a tax concession, but it behaves like a grant, and for all intents and purposes is a grant. So if you're in loss making, which you ought to be in the first year, then you get 45 cents in the dollar that you spend, and they give it to you in cash. Okay, so you submit your tax return, you apply for the R&D tax concession, and you need a number for that. And if you've spent $200,000 on R&D and you haven't made any money, they'll give you $90,000 cash. They'll send you a check. And that's not competitive. Okay, it's not competitive. Everyone gets it. The other one is the Export Market Development Grant. You get about 50 cents in the dollar up to a maximum of 150k. This is somewhat competitive because they cap the amount of money that can be spent on it, but you don't compete and win or lose. Everybody gets the portion of the funds that they apply for if they're able to get it. And that money can be used for even things like Google AdWords, or your marketing overseas, or hiring an overseas sales rep, or onboarding a partner overseas to represent your products. So again, those two grants are not competitive, they are yours, and these are huge things. And I see a lot of companies outsourcing their R&D activities overseas, you know, to Thailand or India or the Philippines, and when you go through what they're having to do, most of the times they weren't aware of the R&D tax concession, and it actually would have been more beneficial for them to stay here. There's other grants like the Commercialisation Australia grants, which can help you write business plans and do other things. They are competitive grants. So you have to be one of the best applications to get the money. And at the Gold Coast, there's some assistance for IT companies from the council. So I believe the Gold Coast Council might be one of the only ones that in the country that is specifically assisting IT companies. If certainly they were the first. There's some state-run programs as well. But the great thing you'll get here is you'll get a low turnover of staff, and you'll get good quality staff, okay? You'll get good people. That's as much as I can do in 15 minutes. So, in summary, if you're here, I'd say leverage the local tax and grant schemes, focus on your speed to market for everything. Leverage the local resources, including the co-working space and things like that, and Steve Dalton has the tech space and is always active around here. And we also have Silicon Lakes and things like that at the Gold Coast. When you go there, when we talk about mentors, it's, you know, and getting people around you, doesn't mean they have to be in your business. You know, if you're working near them, you've got a similar mission, can have massive benefits. Leverage the internet, especially to create those external linkages, and much more. You have to work out for yourselves.